Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Gimel Amud Beis. Starting with Daf Samich Gimel Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the bottom. The previous Amud discussed the prohibition of Shchutei Chutz, sacrificing a carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash. In regards to the Shtei Seirim, the Gemara made the following two statements. First of all, if they were sacrificed outside of the Beis HaMikdash before the Garal, then he would be chayiv for both of the Seirim. If it was after the Garal, he'd be chayiv only for the Seir that is Lechatos. Now the Gemara brings back that second statement. Omar Mar, Mishehigriel Alehen chayiv al shel shem upoter al shel azazel. He'll be chayiv for the Seir Chatos la Hashem, but he will be potter for the seir that is going la Azazel. The Gemara now brings a brisa stating the source for Shchutei Chutz. Tonu Rabbanon, ish mi beis Yisrael, asher yishchat shor or kesev or eiz b'machane. In machane means referring to outside of the Azar in the Beis HaMikdash. Or Yasher Yishchat Michutz LeMachane, or he will then shecht it outside the Machane altogether, outside the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'al Pesach Oil Moed Lo Yeheviu Lahakriv Korban LaHashem. So here we see that there's a prohibition that he should not be makriv the Korban LaHashem outside of the Azara, and certainly outside the Beis HaMikdash. Top of Samar Gimel with Beis. The Brisa says, I Korban. I might think this extends also not only to an offering that's designated as a carbon, but even that which belongs to Bedek HaBayis, which is also referred to as a carbon in the Psukim. So we see that Bedek HaBayis is called a carbon, so maybe that's also included in the prohibition of Shchutei Chutz. Talmud Loimar, Ve'al Pesach Oyel Moyed Loy Heviyoi. That's what the pasuk says is El Pesach Oyel Moyed Loy Heviyu, to teach me Kol HaRoi La Pesach. What's fitting that would be then intended for the Pesach Oyel Moyed Chayovin Alav Bechutz Kol She'ein Roi La Pesach Oyel Moyed Ein Chayim Alav Bechutz. But since the Bedek HaBayis is not intended to be brought inside of the Beis HaMikdash, so therefore there's no prohibition of Shchutei Chutz. The Brisa goes on to say, Oitzi Eilu she'ein ru'uyin lepesach oil moed. This then means to say that it excludes those that are not fitting to be in the Pesach oil moed. V'loy oitzi paras chatos v'siyah shemishtalech shehu roi lavoy el Pesach oil moed. And this will then exclude the siyah mishtalech, which indeed is roy to come to the Pesach Al Moed, because the Kohen Gadol makes the goyral on the eastern part of the Azara of the two Seirim, and also he makes a confession on the Sir HaMishtalech as well. So therefore, l'chor the Sir HaMishtalech is also included in Shchutei Chutz. Talmud Loimar La Hashem. The end of the pasuk says the word La Hashem, Misha Miyuchodin La Hashem. That which is miyuchad la Hashem, to be brought as a korban bifnim, yotzu eilu she'em miyuchadin la Hashem, to exclude the siyah mishtaleach, which is not miyuchadin la Hashem. So now we have brought a pasuk of la Hashem to exclude siyah mishtaleach. Ask the Gemara, ve'la Hashem lahotzehu. Are you saying the word la Hashem comes to exclude the siyah mishtaleach? Ask the Gemara of Reminu. We find in the following brisa that the word La Hashem comes to include a Sir Mistaleach. Says the brisa, Yerotze lekarbin isha La Hashem, it shall be appeased, it shall be accepted as a carbon, a fire offering to Hashem. Eilu ishim. This is referring to the fire offerings, which l'char is all karbonos. And this is talking about those karbonos that are brought in the right time after its 8th day. Where do I know that not only cannot be shechted before the 8th day, but it also cannot be sanctified before its 8th day as well? Talmud Lomar Korban La Hashem. The pasuk says Korban La Hashem. L'rabois Sir HaMishtalech, to include a Sir HaMishtalech. That means a Sir HaMishtalech cannot be designated as a Sir HaMishtalech before its 8th day. So we see over here a contradiction. La Hashem beforehand comes to exclude. La Hashem in this pasuk comes to include the Sir HaMishtalech. Answers the Gemara Amarove Hasam Minyana Dekro. V'hocha Minyana Dekro. It depends on the context of the pasuk. Hasam de El Pesach l'Rabois. There, the El Pesach comes to include a Sir HaMishtalech because the Sir HaMishtalech again, those two Seirim, the girl is done is in the Azara. And also Sir HaMishtalech is confessed upon also inside of the Azara. So it's included in Pesach of Oil Moed. And therefore I need La Hashem Lo Hoitzi. La Hashem comes to exclude the Sir HaMishtalech. There's no Shchutei Chutz. Aval Hocha the Ishe Lo Hoitzi. Here, all of the fire offerings comes to exclude a Sir HaMishtalech. It's not a fire offering. La Hashem is L'Rabos. But the word La Hashem comes to include a Sir HaMishtalech, that you can't sanctify it before its 8th day. The Gemara says, Taima de Rabbi Rachman. The only reason why the Sir HaMishtalech is included is because La Hashem comes to include it, that you can't sanctify the Sir HaMishtalech before its 8th day. That means because of the pasuk that was marbe. Ho Rabbi, but if it did not marbe, from the word La Hashem, Hava Amina Sir HaMishtalech Kadosh b'mechusar zman, I might think then that you could go ahead and sanctify the Sir HaMishtalech even before its right time, even on the 7th day, before the 8th day. Ask the Gemara, how could that be? Veho ein hagaral kovea el beroi lashem. I cannot make a garal for that other seir that will be brought as a korban chatos, unless it's going to be fitting as a korban chatos, and that can only be if it's 8th day. So therefore, I don't know which of the two he-goats is going to be a seir lachatos and a seir la'azozel. So therefore, even the la'azozel, both seirim have to be 8th day or beyond. So therefore, I don't need a pasuk lechora from La Hashem to include a Sir HaMishtalech cannot be sanctified as Sir HaMishtalech before its 8th rightful day, because I already know that from the fact that it has to be included in a garal with another seir that could possibly be chatos. One will certainly be a chatos. Therefore, both of them have to be at least 8 days old, including the Sir HaMishtalech. Answers the Gemara. Omar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Homani. Who is this authored by? Chanan HaMitzrihi. It's authored by Chanan HaMitzri. The Tanya, for thought in the Brisa, Chanan HaMitzri, Oimer afilu dam bekois mevi chavero umezaveg loy. Even if the dam of the chatos la Hashem is in a kois, that means it's already shechted, you can go ahead and bring, and then the Azazel died, you go ahead and bring its pair, that means the Azazel, and mezaveg, and then bring in place of the one that died to then replace it, and then mezaveg it with the other seir that was shechted and its dam is in the kois. In other words, this is telling us that that seir that you're going to mezaveg is now have to be a seir that is at least 8 days old, and that's why we need La Hashem. The Gemara challenges us to answer and says, Eimar de shamas le lechanan hamitzi de lesle dechuyin de lesle hagro lemishamas le. Perhaps the Gemara says that all we hear from this Chanan HaMitzri is that when it comes to dechuyin, there's no dechuyin. He says it's not doesn't become disqualified permanently, and therefore once the other seer can be brought, so you can go ahead and continue. But we don't see from over here the Indian of Hagrola. And therefore we don't see over here that you have to go ahead and Dilma Maisi Umagro. Maybe what he means to say is you have to bring 2 pairs, meaning not 2 pairs, 2 he-goats as a pair and do the Hagrola anew. In which case, Again, shuv, the question is, there we already know, since the two he-goats would have to have at least 8 days or beyond to make it valid, so then I don't need the pasuk la Hashem to include the seir la azozel as being something that has to be 8 days or old. Elo Rav Yosef. Rather, Rav Yosef said, Chomani Rabbi Shimoni. Rather, it's like Rabbi Shimon. To answer up again, the question is, why do we need La Hashem to include a Seir La Azazel that has to be 8 days and old? If it's less than 8 days, then it would be invalid. We already know that from the fact that it's included in the Garal. The Garal has to have 2 he-goats that are at least 8 days old. Elom Rav Yosef, Chomani Rabbi Shimoni. This is authored by Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, Meis Echad Mehen, if one of the 2 he-goats dies, Mevi Chaver Shelo Behagrola, Di Rabbi Shimon, you can bring the other one and mezaveg it without Hagrola. So the fact that you can bring the other one, let's say the he-goat that is Al Azazel dies, so then to bring it, you must bring a he-goat that's going to be 8 days or older. And that's the Chiddush over here of La Hashem to include the Seir La Azazel. That's one answer. The Gemara offers another answer. Ravina Omar, Kigoin Shehumam Vechilol Al Acher. We're talking about a case where the Seir HaMishtaleach, it became something that had a mum, and there became invalid, and they're machalel the kedusha of the Seir HaMishtalech onto another he-goat. Umeno temra, and now the other he-goat therefore would have to be 8 days or older, and therefore that's the inclusion of La Hashem. Ask the Gemara now, where do we note indeed that the Seir HaMishtalech that has a mum is going to be something that can't be used? Umeno temra de postil bei muma. Where do we know that postils the Seir HaMishtalech? The Tanya. The pasuk says, "V'ishe loititnu mehem." In regards to the mumim, it says, "And a fire offering you shall not give from them." The end of the pasuk reads, "Al hamizbech laHashem." So now the Gemara darshans in the brisa. Eilu hachalovim. This refers to the parts that are burnt on the mizbech. Ein li elakulan. I only know all of them. Where do I know even partial, even just a kazayis is going to be posel? That's coming from an animal that's a balmum. Tamulomar mehem mizbeach zuzrikas damim. This is the zrika of the damim on the mizbeach. La Hashem. The end of the posel says La Hashem. La rabois Seir HaMishtalech. So here we see that Seir HaMishtalech is included in a mum. If it has a mum, it's disqualified. It cannot be used as Seir HaMishtalech. So therefore, we found, according to the second answer, another way to describe why La Hashem includes the Seir HaMishtalech in the event that the Seir HaMishtalech became a balmum, and he's mechalel that Seir HaMishtalech onto another Seir HaMishtalech. The new Seir HaMishtalech must be at least 8 days old. Now the Gemara just points out, V'isturich lemichta balmum, v'isturich lemichta mechusar zman. We have to write both of these things in the Torah. The Seir HaMishtalech that is a balmum, as well as a Seir HaMishtalech that is mechusar zman. In both scenarios, they're going to be possible. Why? The E calls Rachman and Mechusar Zman. If the Torah only included the Seir HaMishtalech as Mechusar Zman, being disqualified from La Hashem, Mishum Deloy Mati Zman, because the time did not yet come. It's only the 7 days, and it hasn't been 8 days. Aval Balmum de Mati Zman Emoloi. But a Balmum, where it has its prescribed time, it has at least 8 days. So then I would say it's okay. Because Ravmona Balmum, and if it only wrote in the Torah Balmum disqualifies the Seir HaMishtalech, I would say Mishum Demois, because it's disgusting. So it's a Balmum, it's not appropriate to bring it on the Mizbeach. Or in this case, to bring as a Seir HaMishtalech, which is also a form of service to Hashem. Aval Mechusar Zman Deloy Mois Emoloi. But something that's just Mechusar Zman, it's only the 7th day. It's not Mois, so therefore I would think that's okay. Tzricha, and therefore I need the Torah to write both places La Hashem to include a Seir HaMishtalech, both by Balmum, as well as a Mechusar Zman, that they are both disqualified. Tab Samach Dalam at Aleph. Rava Omar. Rava said a third answer why we need La Hashem to include a Seir HaMishtalech that is going to be at least 8 days old. Kigoin, Shahaya Lo Yichayle B'toich Beisoi. The one who sold the Seir HaMishtaleach, the Seirim to the Beis HaMikdash, to be a Seir HaMishtaleach, V'shochat imoy b'yom HaKippurim. The one who sold it, he had in his household somebody who was a choila sheyesh boi sakana. And therefore, he needed to shech the mother of the Seir HaMishtaleach in order to give that choile food on Yom Kippurim, which would be mutter. But there's a prohibition, the Torah says, of killing, of shechting the offspring on the same day as shechting the mother. So therefore, if the mother was shechted, so now it means that this Seir HaMishtaleach cannot be brought. It's mechusar zman. So that's the scenario. From here we learn out, La Hashem comes to include mechusar zman, even a scenario where the mother was shechted. It cannot be brought as Seir HaMishtaleach. The Gemara now asks on this, V'chi haigavna mi aser, but why should this be aser? However, hooray, you're not shechting the Seir HaMishtaleach. Answers the Gemara, the Gemara asks this question, why is it aser? Lo tishchatu amar rachmana, v'ho lo shchitahi. It says in the Torah, you can't shech the offspring. You're not shechting it. It's Seir HaMishtaleach. It's going la'azozel. Answers the Gemara, ho amrei b'ma'arava, they said, in the west, in Eretz Yisrael, the pushing off over the cliff, the Seir HaMishtaleach, that is its shchita, and therefore that would be included in this prohibition of shechting, or in this case, pushing off the Seir HaMishtaleach the same day that its mother dies. So it comes out we have three different reasons, three different answers why we need La Hashem to include Seir HaMishtaleach for mechusar zman. We saw the first answer was the answer of Rabbi Shimon, and that was a scenario where, indeed, if the Seir HaMishtaleach died, so you want to then mezaveg a new seir as a Seir HaMishtaleach, so then that has to be at least 8 days old. That was Rava's answer. The second answer that we brought was the answer of Ravina, that it got a mum. If it got a mum and you want to chalel that Seir HaMishtaleach onto a new Seir HaMishtaleach, that second Seir, the new one, has to be, again, 8 days old, and La Hashem comes to include that. And the final answer was Rava, that Rava says if the mother was shechted, then it will also be a problem with mechusar zman, and that we only learn from La Hashem if it's not going to be 8 days old, if it's mechusar zman, in this case not only 8 days old, but it's going to be something that's mechusar zman because the mother dies and therefore it needs to be waiting until another day to be valid. This day right now in Yom Kippurim, if the mother was shechted, this Seir HaMishtaleach is going to be invalid, it's going to be possible.